Amazing revelation. Black Nanny discovers blood on Heiress's pajamas, her touching truth exposed. The house sat like a laurel crown, painted in pristine whites and soft pastels, the aura of wealth glowing around it. Lena stepped inside after a long shift, her muscles aching from the demands of her job. With every step, familiarity washed over her, the scent of lavender from the garden outside, the sound of children's laughter fading into silence. But tonight, something felt different, heavier in the air. A sense of dread prickled at her skin, sending shivers down her spine. As she walked to Emily's room, the soft crackling of the comforting stillness broke into a scream in her mind. The door swung open, and her heart dropped. The delicate fabric of Emily's pajamas lay stained with crimson, stark against the white fabric. Lena's breath halted. Was it a harmless spill or something more sinister? Racing thoughts crashed into her consciousness. She had cared for Emily since birth. The child was her world. Yet here was this, a shocking scene demanding attention. She approached the bed, but panic surged through her veins. Should she call for help? What if she misjudged the situation? Instinctively, Lena's hands clenched into fists. She started to clean the pajamas, knowing her role had always been to protect, not to question. But the blood felt like a thread unraveling a tapestry of lies, woven into the fabric of this family's life. What truths lay beneath the polished surface of their affluence? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can, leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The soft glow of the nightlight seemed to mock her. How could Lena step into the world of walking on eggshells? The weight of her loyalty pressed heavily against the urgency of the troubling sight. Could she remain silent, protecting the family who had given her a place to call home? Or was it her duty to confront the potential danger to a child she loved like her own? As she scrubbed at the dark staining fabric, 1,000 emotions swirled within her. Fear grappled with determination. The very idea of speaking out filled her with dread, yet the thought of staying silent felt like betrayal. Lena remembered her dreams of becoming a nurse, a life filled with purpose that had slipped away under the weight of obligation. Each heartbeat echoed her resolve, demanding clarity. The struggle was consuming. Every decision came with its own peril. What she had seen was not just blood, it represented sins of the household. The illusion of a perfect family encased in opulence stood trembling before her. Every moment Lena had fought to nurture their child swirled into a dark cocktail of fear and guilt, shaking her to the core. She knew one thing: silence could no longer be an option. As the night deepened, so did her resolve. Lena felt the desires of her own heart rekindled, a chance to reclaim her voice, to dare step into the light after years of caring for others. Torn between love and injustice, the stakes reached a boiling point. Who would rise to speak for Emily? Who would stand for truths that insisted upon being revealed? She took a deep breath, the air thick with impending answers she was not yet ready to confront. The blood-stained fabric weighed heavily in her grasp. Would it ground her or propel her into confrontation? The answer hung in the air, a tantalizing thread teasing a confrontation, as Lena prepared to decide between the shadows of silence and the blazing light of truth. Lena tossed the soiled pajamas aside, the fabric pooling on the floor like a heavy thought refusing to be ignored. A mixture of fear and anger churned deep within her. She was done being a mere observer in the undercurrent of chaos. This was about Emily's safety, and that came above any obligation she felt to maintain a facade. The walls of the lavish home now loomed closer, suffocating her with unspoken expectations. Each ornate frame held a semblance of happiness, yet she knew the reality behind those smiles. Doubt flickered like a candle in her mind. Would they listen? Would they see her as an equal or merely a hired hand? Her eyes narrowed as she recalled the countless moments when she advocated for Emily's needs, only to be met with dismissive waves from her employer. The family had long been viewed as perfect, but here was evidence of a fracture, a possible crack in their polished existence that Lena could no longer ignore. Determined to act, she paced to the door, her heart pounding with each step. How many times had she led herself to believe that her silence would ensure safety? It was time to shift from a role of servitude to one of agency. She envisioned confronting Sophia, Emily's mother, whose loving demeanor often masked a sharp dismissiveness, the kind that reminded Lena of her own childhood, filled with unfulfilled dreams. Even as she crafted her plan, doubts encroached. What if she couldn't find the words? What if her fears were unfounded and Emily's pajamas were merely a tragic mishap? Lena gritted her teeth. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself anymore. Each moment spent in denial only heightened the stakes for Emily, pushing her to act decisively. The blood was no trivial matter. It was a call to arms for the child she loved. Taking one last breath, she stepped into the hallway, the soft glow of the chandelier flickering misgivings in her mind. The house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a cage disguised by the trappings of wealth. Moving toward Sophia's room, Lena hesitated, gripped by the potential fallout of her confrontation. Would her act usher in chaos or a necessary revelation? Should she knock or simply barge in? The choice felt monumental. She could either stand her ground or retreat into the comforting but suffocating shadow of compliance. With resolve, she rapped her knuckles against the polished wood, the sound echoing like a heart racing toward a crossroads. Moments stretched into an eternity before the door opened, revealing Sophia's serene face, as perfect as ever, yet tinged with confusion. "Lena, what's wrong?" Sophia's voice, usually soothing, felt like a trigger. Lena's pulse quickened. This was it. No more tiptoeing around difficult truths. "It's about Emily," Lena began, her voice steadier than she felt. "I found something in her room." Sophia's brow furrowed, a flicker of concern etched across her features, but the moment passed as quickly as it came. "What do you mean?" Lena swallowed hard, willing her voice to rise above the mounting fear. "I found blood on her pajamas. I need to talk to you about this." The cluttered silence hung between them, stark and tangible. Lena could read the subtle shift in Sophia's eyes, the tension pooling as she processed the weight of Lena's words. Would Sophia see the truth, or would she dismiss Lena again, sliding back into her comfortable denial? Suddenly, the door behind Sophia opened wider, revealing Ryan, her husband, a man whose disinterest in family matters was a whispered rumor in their home. The way he glanced around gave Lena the impression he was more attuned to the aesthetics of luxury than the pressing worries of the child they both claimed to love. "What's going on?" Ryan's deep voice broke through the moment, his 9-to-5 demeanor clashing with the seriousness of Lena's revelation. Lena's stomach tightened. With both parents now present, her resolve flickered like a light in a storm. The time had come to speak, not just for Emily, but also for herself. A chance to shatter the silence that had bound her for too long. What she would say could alter everything. Lena inhaled slowly, preparing to unveil the truth. The air crackled with unknowing potential as she held her ground. In that charged moment, everything hung in the balance. Her words, Emily's fate, and her own future, not just as a caregiver, but as a woman finally daring to reclaim her voice. Lena's heart raced as she surveyed the rapidly shifting expressions crossing Sophia's face: denial, confusion, and ultimately a flicker of defensiveness. For too long she had been an echo, her voice softened and shrouded in the confines of her position, but the certainty in her words felt like an armor, protecting the vulnerable narratives she was about to unleash. Sophia, clearly flustered, opened her mouth to speak,
but Lena surged ahead. "Sophia, I've seen so many signs that something
isn't right. It's not just the pajamas. It's the bruises I've noticed on Emily's arms, the whispers of sadness when she thinks no one's listening. I can't stand by and let her suffer in silence." For once, Lena's directness seemed to cut through the thick haze of misunderstanding. Ryan's posture shifted slightly, his arms crossed as if bracing himself against an impending storm. Lena seized the moment, feeling the gravity of her words settle around them, binding them to a harsh yet vital truth. "Sophia, Emily needs help, and she counts on us to be the adults in her life. You may believe that my opinions don't hold weight in this home, but I'm asking you to listen not to the nanny, but to a fellow human being who has seen the child you adore struggle." Each word she spoke reinforced her conviction, a new energy cradling her nervousness and transforming it into power. Sophia's lips formed a tight line, conflict swirling in her eyes. "Lena, that's not fair. You can't accuse us of neglect. Things happen. Kids are clumsy. I'm sure it's nothing." "No, it isn't nothing." The sharpness in Lena's voice startled even her. A thrilling rush, one of her hidden talents, unraveled before her, the power to confront, the ability to speak on behalf of those silenced. She had buried this beneath layers of compliance, but now it felt liberating to expose it. In asserting herself, she was more than just an employee. She was the advocate Emily needed. The tension ballooned in the room as Sophia's indignation wrestled with the undeniable truth of Lena's observations. Ryan, with his stoical demeanor, stepped forward, perhaps sensing that the confrontation would not settle with Sophia's default dismissal. "Let's consider it, Sophia. If Lena feels this strongly, shouldn't we at least look into what she's saying? We can't just brush it off." His voice carried a depth Lena hadn't expected, breaking through the simmering emotions between the three of them. It was enough to prompt Sophia to deflect her indignation toward Ryan, yet the urgency in his tone made Lena wary. Would they advocate for Emily, or would they remain trapped in the bubble of denial they had built around their privileged existence? As silence took hold once more, Lena's mind raced. What if confronting them splintered this fragile connection they had? But what would truly shatter? Her relationship with them, or Emily's spirit if she remained passive? A sense of minute self-doubt tinged Lena's clarity, revealing not just fear, but the awareness she had to dismantle a long-cherished belief that the safety and well-being of others ultimately resided outside her control. Her own agency, once stifled, was now emerging, demanding recognition. "I won't stop asking questions," she stated firmly, glancing between both parents. "You may choose to ignore me, but I will make sure Emily's voice is heard, even if it has to be through mine." The room thickened with tension, each parent caught in their own conflict. Lena felt the weight of their shared silence transform into something electric. Her next action was looming on the horizon. What would happen if they chose to close ranks, reinforcing their denial? She took a breath, feeling the tremor of anxiety lapping at her resolve. This was not just a confrontation, it was a pivotal moment for her, testing the foundations of her self-worth and the integrity she had desperately clung to in a world that often echoed disregard. And then a thought struck her like lightning. What if she could not only advocate for Emily, but also find her own voice as a woman, a mother to a child who had watched too many injustices unfold? The uncharted path lay before her, swathed in uncertainty, but glimmering with promise. Lena had the chance to discover not only what she could do for Emily, but what a truly empowered Lena would look like, fighting through every instinct to retreat. What happens next, she pondered, a surge of determination igniting her spirit. The moment of decision had arrived, and Lena knew the time was now. She couldn't just be a caretaker, she had to become a protector. The air crackled with the echoes of potential. Would this stand finally forge a path toward liberation? Or would the darkness behind Sophia's calm facade swallow them whole? The air remained heavy as Lena's declaration hung in the space between them, hanging on the edge of confrontation. Time slowed as she contemplated the storm she had unleashed. She felt a mix of exhilaration and dread. Her heart beat like a war drum in her chest, urging her forward while anchoring her in place. Sophia turned sharply towards Ryan, her eyes flickering with unshed tears, vulnerability clashing with her desire to maintain control. "Can you not see how ridiculous this is?" she asked him, her voice taut with emotion. "We are good parents. We give Emily everything she could want." Lena braced herself, driven not just by the need to speak up for Emily, but also to defy the silence that had neatly tucked her own feelings into the background for far too long. She considered how gently she had treaded in this household, always the obedient caregiver, always the one who catered to everyone else's needs. That time was over. "Good parenting isn't measured solely by material possessions," Lena retorted, finding strength in conviction as her fingers grazed the edge of the table. "It's what she feels in moments that you don't see, in whispers that she thinks are unheard. Emily needs love, protection, and someone to stand by her." Sophia visibly flinched, as if Lena's words were an unexpected slap, and Lena's stomach churned. She didn't want to drive Sophia away further, but every instinct told her she was reaching into a vital core of truth. What if confronting these realities could yield change, not only for Emily, but also for her? Maybe this was the start of a crucial transformation, not only for the child in the room, but for her own aspirations. Ryan shifted, his expression now one of contemplation rather than dismissal. "What do you propose we do?" he asked, and Lena's pulse quickened. This was an open door, an opportunity to guide them, a chance to channel not only anger and frustration, but also hope. "First, we have to talk to Emily," she replied, her voice steadier now, her focus sharpening. "We need to let her know she is safe and that her feelings are valid. We can't overlook what's happening just because it's uncomfortable. Ignoring the truth only allows it to fester." Sophia's face became a mask of indecision, her cheeks flushed. Lena could see the inner turmoil. This was a mother grappling with fear and denial. It was both painful to witness and imperative to acknowledge. "What if I am not enough?" she whispered to herself in the periphery of her thoughts. It was a daunting realization, yet it was swiftly quelled by renewed determination. She would not let fear dictate the course. The display of anger that had previously pulsed through the kitchen began to ebb away, replaced by a semblance of calm, though the air still crackled with tension. The critical work ahead loomed large, daunting but exhilarating, a journey to reshape not only Emily's reality, but her own. As she prepared her next words, Lena couldn't shake the sensation that she was standing on a precipice, not just of confrontation, but of self-discovery. Each moment with Emily over the years, every laugh shared and tear shed, had stitched together a thread of loyalty. She was more than just a caregiver, she was becoming a bridge. "Let's make a plan together," Lena suggested, taking a step closer to them, her gaze steady. "That way, the next time she's hurt, she knows she can come to us." Sophia's eyes finally returned to Lena, uncertainty beginning to melt into something resembling understanding. The path forward would require transparency, vulnerability, and a willingness to accept what they had long been denying. "I can help with that," Ryan said slowly, his voice filled with an unexpected gentleness. A small flicker of relief ignited in Lena, but shadows of doubt still lurked. What if their commitment evaporated under pressure? What if challenging preconceived notions endangered their family dynamic? But there was no going back. The battle for Emily was only the beginning, and Lena felt a new dawn approach, one that would perhaps shine not just with hope for a child, but also with clarity for herself. And as the conversation momentarily paused, Lena realized she would not simply advocate, she would move further into the unknown, where her own worth was as crucial as that of the child she sought to protect. In that moment, a whisper of grit surged within her, challenging her resolve. What more must I confront to truly prevent a greater darkness? The challenge was clear. The time had come to face a system that had long turned its eyes away, and Lena felt a growing urgency. Within, to dismantle the facade before her. Lena stood in the kitchen, a storm brewing inside her as Ryan and Sophia mulled over the gravity of their situation. The walls felt both familiar and foreign, a reminder of all the days she had spent within this household, feelings bottled up and unacknowledged. Every breath was a step toward reclaiming agency, but the lingering fear of rejection imbued her thoughts like shadows lurking on the edges of her resolve. "Let's set a time to talk to Emily," she suggested, her voice firm, wanting to establish a concrete plan. "It needs to be soon, tonight if possible." The urgency in her tone startled even herself, an instinct telling her that this was the pivotal moment for them. For too long she had tiptoed around issues, accommodating the fraught dynamics at play. No longer. Ryan nodded slowly, almost as if he were weighing her words against the gravity of the situation. Lena took a breath, attempting to steady the racing thoughts that threatened to engulf her. Doubt tried to creep back in. What if her emotions overwhelmed the fragile truce they were forming? What if this conversation didn't go as planned? "Are you sure, Lena?" Sophia asked, her voice trembling, an earnest need for reassurance evident. "You're not just trying to stir unnecessary conflict, are you?" It was a simple enough question, but it struck a nerve. A sense of betrayal wormed its way through Lena, even as she sought understanding. After all her efforts, did they still see her as the caretaker? A part of her felt like they were dismissing her validity, as if her emotions were secondary. "I want to make sure we are doing what's best for Emily," she replied, her tone soft but resolute. "We cannot afford to ignore her pain any longer. This is about her, and it's about all of us facing the truth, no matter how difficult it may be." There was a palpable silence as Lena's plea hung in the air, thick with the weight of unspoken truths. Ryan's expression shifted, revealing a crack in his previous indifference. Maybe he realized that Sophia's defenses ran deeper than the surface. This realization sent a wave of relief washing over Lena, accompanied by an undeniable flicker of hope. "Okay," Ryan finally said, his voice steadier. "We'll talk to her tonight." Watching them come together created a warmth inside her, one she had longed for. Perhaps, in some small way, her advocacy was becoming a catalyst for change not only in Emily's life, but within the family. Lena had felt invisible for too long, but she was eager to become more than just a supporting role in their lives. As the hours passed and shadows gathered in the corners of the room, Lena turned her focus inward. This was more than an intervention, it was a rehearsal for her own transformation. She could no longer navigate through complacency. While she had spent years nurturing Emily, it was time to nurture her own needs. Sighing, she tried to lose herself in organizing the day's remaining tasks, but the weight of anticipation clung to her. It promised vulnerability. She couldn't avoid it, nor did she want to. That hesitation was part of her growth. Perhaps this was her crucible, the formation of something stronger forged in the fires of confrontation. By the time the clock neared 7, a sense of resolve coursed through her. She felt different, each breath imbued with confidence. Yet a new ache gnawed at her. Could she truly be strong enough to handle the chaos their conversation might invoke? Facing the unknown now felt both exhilarating and terrifying. As they gathered in the softly lit living room later that evening, Lena felt the contours of dread reshaping into a challenging anticipation. The gravitational pull toward Emily's room was magnetic, as if healing waited just a few steps away, nestled securely behind a door. She steadied her breath, glancing at Ryan and Sophia as they sought their footing. Lena, now more than a caregiver, stood at the frontier of a greater transformation. She was ready. But just as she began to formulate how to start the conversation, her thoughts exploded into a whirlwind.
What if Emily did not want to talk? What if addressing the pain opened an unbridgeable chasm instead of healing? The moment of truth had arrived. Lena's heart raced as she stood in the living room, surrounded by the tangible silence that hung like fog. She scanned the faces of Ryan and Sophia. They were tense yet determined, echoing her conflicted resolve. This moment marked the cresting of their long journey through denial, yet the uncertainty weighed heavily on their shoulders. "Okay, let's do this," she said tentatively, her voice breaking through the tension. She could almost feel the air thicken in her throat. Part of her wanted to run, to escape from the burden of confrontation, but another part, stronger, bolder, recognized that she had crossed a threshold, and there was no turning back now. Ryan led the way to Emily's room, his footsteps firm, though his fists were visibly clenched. Lena followed closely, focusing on the rhythm of their combined breaths. Each step felt like a prelude, a necessary march toward transformation rather than an inevitable doom. When they reached the door, Lena hesitated. Her mind circled around an unyielding thought. What they were about to delve into might shatter any semblance of normalcy. Would Emily even be receptive? Did they have the strength to handle whatever the response might be? Ryan turned back and met Lena's eyes with an understanding that calmed her frayed nerves, if only slightly. It was a silent acknowledgement. He was just as scared as she was, but each needed the other to push through this moment. With a soft knock, Ryan eased the door open, revealing Emily absorbed in a world of her own, seated cross-legged on her bed. Her gaze instinctively darted toward them, confusion mixing with a hint of change.
Of defensiveness. "Emily," Ryan started, his voice uncharacteristically shaky. "What's going on?" Her tone was sharp, a protective barrier against whatever storm was brewing. "You know, we've all kind of been avoiding some conversations. We need to talk," Ryan stated, his resolve faltering slightly under the weight of Emily's stare. Before Emily could respond, Lena felt an urgent tug at her heart. It was her moment. "Emily, please, I want to talk about how you've been feeling, how we've been navigating these changes." Her voice was a whisper at first, but it grew firmer with each word, fueled by an impulse to break through the wall. "I'm fine," Emily snapped, an immediate defensive reaction. But Lena saw the flicker of hurt underlying that bravado. "No, you're not," Lena countered, stepping closer, determined to breach the chasm separating them. "You don't have to pretend anymore. This isn't just about you. It's about us all facing our truths together." The brief silence that followed was a revelation. Lena could almost hear Emily's internal struggle, the faint rustle of despair mingling with the innate desire for connection. "What do you know about truth?" Emily shot back, adrenaline fueling her indignation. "You're just here to clean up the mess and keep the peace." The accusation hit Lena like a tidal wave. It stung deeply, more than she anticipated. Yet, in that moment, she realized how often she had succumbed to being the emotional janitor in everyone's life, while keeping her pain bottled away. A revelation hewn from the sharp edges of self-awareness. Taking a deep breath, Lena steadied herself. "You're right," she replied quietly, her vulnerability unspooling in the air. "I have tried to smooth things over, but that doesn't mean I don't also struggle. I'm here, willing to share my pieces, and I need the same from you." As she spoke, Lena felt an unexpected surge of courage blooming within her. It was a recognition that she was not merely there to fix things. Her emotions were valid, her experiences worthy of discussion. In that moment, she was both the advocate and the warrior, fighting for her own truth, even amidst her fears. Emily's frown softened perceptibly, and for the first time, Lena felt a crack in her defenses as the girl began to reluctantly lower her shield of anger. A dialogue was creating itself, slowly yet persistently. Suddenly, though, the door creaked open wider as Sophia stood beside Lena, her eyes gleaming with intensity.
"We're all in pain, Emily, but we don't have to do this alone. We can face this together." The room charged with a raw energy, the air thick with anticipation. With every heartbeat, the possibility for reconciliation blossomed, transforming dread into something brimming with promise. Yet, just as hope flickered to life, like a flame under wind, a new thought crossed Lena's mind. Could their collective willingness to confront what ailed them be enough to change everything? What if the conversations ahead illuminated wounds too deep for any balm?
That moment of hope, mingling with anxiety, Lena realized they all stood on the precipice of change, where healing could either bind them together or fracture them irreparably. The risk felt monumental, and the moment stretched, filled with uncertainty as Emily's gaze locked onto Lena's, a silent invitation hanging in the air, the inflection point where something extraordinary might finally unfold. The path was unclear, but Lena was ready to move forward, to take that leap into the unknown. But as the silence stretched, a sudden noise from the hallway interrupted them, a sharp cry that shattered the delicate equilibrium they had just begun to establish. What had happened? What new barrier lay ahead? Lena's heart jolted at the sound echoing from the hallway, a piercing cry that seemed to cut through the fragile tension in the room. It felt as if time condensed around the noise, with past anxieties merging into a singular, pressing urgency. The intense gaze between her and Emily momentarily fractured, replaced by a shared instinctual dread. "Did you hear that?" Sophia whispered, her voice trembling slightly, barely audible over the rapid thud of Lena's heart. It wasn't just the uncertainty of the moment, but the weight of their internal struggles threatening to seep into the physical space they had just begun to negotiate. "Let me check," Ryan said, stepping back cautiously. Lena could see a flicker of protectiveness in his posture, a stark reminder that they were caught not only in an emotional standoff, but also in an unpredictable reality. He moved toward the door, glancing back at Lena, searching for reassurance, a cue she suddenly felt ill-equipped to provide. "Wait," Lena said, her voice a shade firmer than before, a new resolve awakening within her. "Let's stick together. Whatever this is, we face it as a unit." She refused to let fear dictate their actions. She wasn't just a mediator now, but a pillar that bolstered solidarity. This moment was more than a confrontation with Emily. It had morphed into a collective trial. Ryan hesitated but nodded, returning to their grouped formation. In that instant, Lena realized how far she had come. She wasn't simply the glue trying to mend the fractures anymore. She was actively engaging, rallying the strength of their shared reality. The cry from the hallway broke the silence again, sharper and filled with a twinge of desperation that cut through the atmosphere. Lena's mind whirled with possibilities, imagining all the scenarios that might unfold. Her instinct, honed by a lifetime of playing the role of caretaker, was desperate to swoop in and remedy whatever chaos lay outside that door. "Should we call for help?" Sophia asked, her hands now fidgeting at her sides, the glimmer of intensity fading into fear. Yet in Sophia's question, Lena recognized an opportunity, an opening to engage her own strength, to challenge the very patterns that had defined them. "No," Lena said, her voice steadying, fortified by a sense of clarity she hadn't felt before. "We need to find. Let's out what's happening first. We need to trust ourselves." It was not just a decision against fear. It was also a declaration that they each held value, that their voices mattered in the unfolding narrative, that they could affect change rather than be swept away by external forces. Ryan took a deep breath, giving Lena a grateful nod, while Emily's eyes flickered with something bordering on surprise, perhaps encouragement. In that moment, Lena recognized the gravity of her position. Not only was she stepping into her own power, but she was also inviting Emily and Sophia to do the same. With a chorus of heartbeats, they moved forward. Lena led the charge, each step down the hall fueled with determination. She didn't know what they would find,
but she was resolute. This was a critical turning point. Consciously intertwining her quest for personal clarity with the needs of those around her, Lena was no longer willing to dissolve into the background. As they approached the end of the corridor, Lena's breath quickened. Light streamed through an open doorway, illuminating the anxious expressions on their faces. They halted, peering into the room that had suddenly become the epicenter of their fears and uncertainties. The sight that greeted them struck Lena with a visceral blow, a scene unlike anything she was prepared for. A crumpled figure lay on the floor, and the distance between understanding and chaos seemed to collapse around her. "Lena," Ryan whispered, his voice barely escaping the trembling confines of his lungs. There was a plea in his tone, an unspoken request for her to take the lead once again, even as the ground beneath them threatened to shift. Lena looked back at her companions, each face a reflection of her inner turmoil. They had come here seeking truth, but now what awaited them was a reality they couldn't escape. Would this confrontation provide clarity or spiral them deeper into confusion? "We can't turn back now," Lena said, asserting her decision one last time, squeezing her fists as the determination surged. "We need to know what's really happening." And with that, she stepped through the threshold, knowing that each step was not just toward a new discovery, but the potential to unravel the very fabric of their intertwined lives, who they were and who they could become. But would the truth they uncovered ignite a healing process, or would it propel them into an abyss they might never escape? The room felt charged with an almost electric energy as Lena stepped into the light. Shadows danced in the corners, but her focus remained anchored on the crumpled figure at her feet. Involuntarily, her breath caught in her throat as her eyes adjusted. Her mind raced, parsing through the implications even before she could grasp what lay before her. "Come on," she urged her friends softly, her voice barely rising above a whisper. "We need to get closer." Every step felt monumental, loaded with the weight of their collective fears and the promises of what
they sought to uncover. Each footfall echoed Lena's determination to transform this moment of chaos into an opportunity for growth, both for herself and the others. As the group edged forward, the scene before them crystallized into a stark reality. The figure, a young woman, lay in disheveled pajama pants, streaked with crimson. Panic began to ripple through Lena's chest, but she forced herself to stay grounded. This was not merely an accident. It felt like a pivotal juncture, a chance to redefine their understanding of themselves amid calamity. "Is she—" Sophia's voice trailed off, unable to articulate the looming question hovering between them. "No," Lena replied, her tone firm despite the uncertainty clawing at her insides. "We have to help her." Her instinct to nurture, buried beneath years of self-doubt, surged forward. This was not about running from their fears, but confronting them with compassion and courage. "Don't touch anything," Ryan warned, eyes scanning the surroundings, the protective instinct morphing into an urgency that wrapped around them like a thick fog. Lena's mind kicked into overdrive. How could she harness her intuition to lead them through this maze of confusion? She glanced down at the young woman, searching for any signs of life, fighting an urge to bend down and check her pulse. "Look for a phone," Lena directed, her voice commanding as clarity washed over her. "Sophia, check the other side of the room. Ryan, help me see how serious this is." In that moment, Lena felt the ground beneath her shift. This wasn't merely an act of heroism, it was the evolution of her self-definition. She was not merely a caretaker in crisis anymore. She was now in command. The roles had changed, and she was navigating this chaotic storm, lighting a path for the others. As they worked in uneasy tandem, Lena reflected on the journey that had brought her here. Every instance of self-doubt had forged a steelier resolve within her. The cries from the hallway had not just summoned fear, but a visceral call to action, guiding her discovery of newfound strength. Suddenly, the young woman stirred, a shuddering breath escaping her lips. Lena felt an unexpected swell of relief mixed with exhilaration.
"Hey," she said gently, embodying authority and empathy. "You're going to be okay. We're here to help." The girl's eyes fluttered open, revealing bewilderment that swirled with pain. In that instant, Lena understood more about her own emotional barriers than she ever had in quiet contemplation. Moments like these, filled with raw vulnerability, had the power to shape her true character. But as silence settled over them, a chilling realization gripped Lena. The incident surrounding the figure was not simply an accident. It was a catalyst for deeper revelations about their intertwined lives. Each question they would face from here on out held the potential to either strengthen their bonds or tear them apart. "What's your name?" Lena pressed, kneeling beside the young woman, positioning herself as a lifeline. The moment lingered.
Charged with anticipation, a decision point on the cusp of revelation. Just then, a noise reverberated from the hallway, a distinct echo of footsteps approaching. The tension in the air thickened as Lena locked eyes with her friends, uncertainty flaring once more. "Lena, what do we do?" Ryan's voice had a tremor, the heat of the situation intensifying once more. The question hung heavily in the air, not just about the immediate danger, but also about the core of their own vulnerabilities. Would they be ready to confront what lay ahead? And what truths would emerge from this upheaval? Truths that might change everything they believed. Lena took a deep breath, preparing herself to forge ahead into this unknown. The echoes of possibility reverberated in her mind, each one charged with the promise of transformation. A shiver ran through Lena as the footsteps grew closer, each thump echoing like the heartbeat of the crisis they found themselves in. Her instincts screamed at her to protect her group, but there was a nascent resolve blossoming within, urging her to stand firm in this moment of chaos. "Stay close," she whispered, eyeing the door as shadows shifted beyond it. Time seemed to stretch, each second a lifetime of wrestling emotions. The young woman at her feet stirred again, her eyes flickering with realization, confusion, and pain. Lena's heart ached for her, but there was no time to dwell on emotions. They were at a tipping point. "What do you know?" Lena asked, the words emerging with an unexpected command. Connecting with the woman felt pivotal, like an anchor in this storm. "Help us understand what's happening." The girl's mouth moved, forming words that trailed off into a whisper. Lena leaned closer, not just physically, but emotionally. "Please," she urged softly, "you're not alone. We're here for you." Just as the girl fought to speak, the door swung open with a start, framing a figure silhouetted by the light behind them. The newcomer halted, and Lena held her breath, anxiety rippling through her. This could either be salvation or another layer of turmoil. "Get away from her!" The voice struck like lightning, sharp and disorienting. Lena's chest tightened as she recognized the authoritative tone. It belonged to Mr. Barrett, the house manager. The air thickened with tension, and Lena realized her leadership would soon be tested. "Sir, we're trying to help," Lena replied, her voice steady, but inside she was burning fire. She felt a wave of defiance crash over her. No longer could she be a mere observer in her own life. This was her chance to claim stakes in a reality fraught with peril and personal growth. "Help?" Mr. Barrett scoffed. "The police should be here any moment, and you lot are trespassing." Lena felt the eyes of her friends on her, a mix of worry and hope. She could sense the doubt simmering next to the urgency, infecting the very air they breathed. "You don't understand," she pressed, her voice rising slightly, courage swelling as she spoke. "She needs medical attention, and she may have been attacked. We can't just sit around and wait." For a moment, Lena felt the weight of her own words. In this confrontation, she was no longer just Lena. She was a sounding board for unmeasured fears and realizations, pushing back against the inertia of her past. Mr. Barrett paused, uncertainty flickering across his features for just a heartbeat. It was a crack in his armor, and Lena seized that moment. "People can bleed while we stay silent," she challenged. "You have to trust me. We don't have to wait for help. We can start now." Tension hung heavily as everyone processed her plea, the room seemingly shrinking under its weight. What had started as mere survival now pivoted into something greater, a pursuit of truth and action cloaked in moral ambiguity. "Fine," he said finally, reluctant but perhaps realizing the urgency mirrored his own unspoken fears. "But you'll be held accountable if anything goes wrong." Lena's resolve hardened. "Trust me, I will be." As she knelt beside the young woman again, the girl's eyes locked onto Lena's, desperation transforming into flickers of hope. In that fleeting moment, Lena understood. Every trial thrown her way was a crucible molding her identity. Every act of defiance, every choice made in the face of fear, led her closer to the person she had always longed to be. Lena took a deep breath, preparing to embrace the next layers of this tumultuous reality. But just before she could ask another question, the young woman croaked out a name. It sliced through the air like a dagger, sending Lena into a spiral of questions. "Anya," she whispered, eyes brimming with tears. Just then, footsteps sounded again, but they were not from the direction they had first anticipated. Lena's pulse quickened as she turned toward the noise, and the door creaked open, revealing a chilling figure. And in that moment, Lena realized that Anya's name held the key to secrets far deeper than she had ever considered. What truth lay ahead? And how would it unearth hidden parts of herself she had yet to confront? The atmosphere crackled with anticipation, and Lena stood at the nexus of her evolving path. As the figure stepped into the light, Lena's heart sank. It was Sophia's younger brother, Adrian. His face, usually embodying charm and carefree indifference, was now marred by horror and disbelief. He stood frozen, mouth agape, as if processing the chaotic tableau before him. The air thickened with tension, and the weight of expectation hung heavily in the room. "What happened here?" Adrian's sharp voice cut through the silence, demanding an answer. Lena realized that time didn't afford her the luxury of hesitation. Every second flowed like a thread in a complex tapestry, intertwining her fate with those around her. "Adrian, we need help," Lena exclaimed, her voice steady yet urgent, gripping the gravity of the situation with both hands. "This girl, Anya, she needs immediate medical attention. Please call an ambulance." For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Lena saw resolve flicker in Adrian's eyes. Where the casual arrogance had once reigned, a flicker of competence ignited. He pulled out his phone, hands trembling slightly as he dialed. As the sounds of the call filled the air, a ripple of relief passed through her. This was a significant moment, a turning point. They were no longer just bystanders in a crisis. They were uniting to confront the tangled web of reality. "Who is she?" Adrian asked, his voice now quieter, respecting the gravity of the moment. Lena caught Anya's gaze, filled with a blend of fear and trust. It was a silent pact of solidarity. In that instant, Lena understood the definition of advocacy, being a voice for someone who had lost theirs. "She's been hurt," Lena replied, her voice unwavering. "But we can't let the pain silence us. We have to help her find her strength back." Each word dripped with the urgency of the truth that had been hard fought, echoing the growth she had undergone through her confrontation with Sophia and Ryan. As Adrian relayed information to the dispatcher, Lena's instincts kicked in. She knelt beside Anya, gently brushing strands of hair away from her face. "You're going to be okay, Anya. We're taking care of you," she soothed, the warmth of connection bridging the gap that had almost swallowed them whole. It was the affirmation of her newfound competence, expressing empathy while asserting her purpose. Slowly, Anya's eyes flickered open in understanding, and Lena caught a glimpse of the girl finding her voice through pain. In this moment, everything shifted. Lena wasn't just a caregiver, she was actively participating in the unfolding of a narrative much larger than herself. "Lena," Anya murmured, barely above a whisper, "I didn't want anyone to know." Her eyes darted toward the doorway, fear mixing with recognition of her own vulnerabilities.
Lena shook her head firmly. "You no longer have to hide. We're safety in numbers, and I promise we will protect you." The fierce conviction in her voice startled even herself, but it was the culmination of everything she had fought for, not just for Emily, but for every silent story begging to be told. Just then, Sophia entered the room, her expression shifting from shock to fierce determination as she assessed the scene. Lena could see the transition take place. This was not the passive observer. This was a mother, a protector, thrust into action. "What can I do?" Sophia asked, voice threading through the fray, her need to engage evident. The fractures in their family dynamic were beginning to heal. "Help Adrian get Anya comfortable," Lena directed. "We need to create a safe space. And no more hiding. Speak the truth, even if it's uncomfortable." Sophia nodded, and the tension in the air began to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. They were rallying around Anya, her silent plea transforming vibrant action among them.
All. As sirens wailed in the distance, the energy in the room pulsed with a shared resolve. Each of them, Lena, Adrian, Sophia, had begun to shed previous identities, emerging as fierce protectors and advocates. This was about more than Anya now. They were dismantling silence, pooling their strength. Moments later, the paramedics rushed in, carried by urgency. What had once felt overwhelming now became a unified front as Lena stepped back, aware the professionals would take the lead. Watching as Anya received the care she desperately needed, something profound shifted within Lena. It was more than just satisfaction. It was an intertwining of her identity with purpose. The confrontation had forged not only a protector in her, but a fierce advocate, someone who was unwilling to yield in silence. Adrian, spirited and engaged, looked at Lena, eyes sparkling with newfound respect. "Thank you for not backing down," he said quietly, acknowledging the strength she had cultivated through vulnerability. Lena smiled, catching Adrian's gaze. "There's power in speaking up. Let's keep protecting those who feel they can't." Though the circumstances had been shrouded in darkness, Lena found herself standing in the light of her evolution. The fear that had chased her away from her dreams no longer shackled her. In this charged moment, she recognized the truth. Her journey, once built on quiet servitude, had morphed into something radiant. She was not simply Lena the nanny. She was Lena, a determined woman who achieved the heights of her potential by embracing her voice. As Anya was wheeled away, a flicker of hope shone in Lena's heart. This moment had been the catalyst for profound transformation. Each painful step brought her here, standing not just as a caregiver, but as a staunch advocate for the truths that demanded to be unveiled. She looked toward Sophia, who nodded with understanding. This wasn't the end. It was a beginning. They had forged a connection through adversity, celebrating a fresh chapter glowing ahead of them. The journey they had embarked upon was merely the first step in a much grander narrative, reflecting resilience and possibility. "Let's make sure this is only the start," Lena said, resolve firm in her voice. Sophia nodded resolutely, and Adrian broke into a smile, finally understanding the power of standing united. Fueled by incidents that blended pain with growth, they would stride forth, buoyed by love and unwavering in their purpose. The universe had opened before Lena, and she was ready to embrace it fully. Each challenge ahead was but an opportunity to redefine and reclaim her narrative anew. More than anything, she knew she could stand proud, having conquered her greatest fears. Now was the time to pursue what she had long denied, a life vigorous with purpose, bustling with integrity, and flanked by those who championed the truth. And with that exhilarating clarity, Lena embraced the moment, ready to carve a path not only for herself, but for all whose voices remained unheard. This is the moment to show your support. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Every click counts. Comment your reactions and theories about this final chapter. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Stand with us as we unlock the power of personal transformation.